Here, he is chief executive of two startup companies with bold missions. He leads Tesla Motors, the electric car company that has attracted attention from both car enthusiasts and environmentalists as well. The company's powerful roadster, which can travel from 0 to 60 in less than 4 seconds, is entirely powered by batteries. The company plans to break into the mainstream auto market with an electric sedan as early as 2011. Musk is also founder and CEO of Space Exploration Technologies, a company trying to slash the cost of space travel. Last year, the company signed an agreement with NASA to send cargo to the International Space Station. And if that is not enough, he's also chairman of a growing company called Solar City that installs solar panels on homes and businesses. He has thrived in Silicon Valley, one of the co-founders of PayPal, the online payments company that eBay bought for $1.5 billion in 2002. I am pleased to have him here at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of the show for a long time.
Let's just talk about you first, so that if the audience does not know, growing up in South Africa.
Yeah.
And how did you end up in Canada?
I guess growing up in South Africa, it was very technology oriented, and I taught myself how to program computers, mostly because I wanted to program games.
Right.
And when I was about 12, I sold my first game, and whenever I'd read about technology and great innovation, it was coming from the United States, and so it was that's where I wanted to be. And I tried to convince my parents to move there, and neither of them would. They were divorced. I tried my father, neither would do it. My mother later moved back to initially Canada and then the U.S. And so when I was 17, as soon as I got my Canadian passport, 3 weeks later I was in Canada.
So here you are, and you come to Canada and make it to the United States, and then you and several other guys come together and create PayPal.
Right. And
you sell it to eBay for $5 billion.
Yeah. So after PayPal, that gave me a fair bit of capital, and there were three areas. When I was in college, there were three areas that I thought would most affect the future of humanity. And those were the internet, the transition to a sustainable energy and transportation sector, and the third was space exploration, in particular the extension of life to multiple planets. Now, I didn't ever expect to be involved in the third one, but that seemed to me that's something that would be very important for the future. And with the capital that I got from the sale of PayPal, I was able to go into both those areas. And so hence SpaceX and in the space, and then in the sustainable energy and transportation, you've got Solar City and Tesla.
Let me talk about space exploration just for a moment. How is it going in terms of creating the systems that will engage us in space exploration, not just for governments and not just for NASA, but for private citizens as well?
Well, you have to divide the efforts that are going on into what is an orbit class effort versus a suborbital class effort, and there's really a very big difference. But the general public doesn't understand the difference between getting to space and getting to orbit, and so it's important to make that distinction. To do a suborbital flight, you need a terminal velocity of around Mach 3.
Right.
To get to orbit, you need a terminal velocity of Mach 25. It's a huge difference, and because the energy required to do that scales with the square of the velocity. So suborbital might be 9 units of energy. Orbit is 625 units of energy. So it's only about 1.5% of the energy of orbit is required to get to suborbit. So there are a number of efforts in the suborbital category that certainly could grow one day to orbital. There's Jeff Bezos has an effort. And I know that's something that's pretty.
Is Branson involved in this or not?
Yeah, Branson, absolutely.
Right.
Not so much directly from the technology standpoint, but from he's funding that development at scaled composites in California.
And what are you doing?
So we're in the orbit class, and that's it's a lot more capital, and that's really where you're sort of pushing the ragged edge of what's physically possible. And last year we got to orbit for the first time with our rocket, and that was certainly a huge relief and a milestone.
Yeah, and so what's the next step? You're going to rocket into orbit.
Yeah, so next month we were putting a satellite for Malaysia into orbit, and then
from Malaysia.
For Malaysia.
Oh, for Malaysia.
Yeah, right. So the Malaysian satellite, but in the rocket business, the rocket company does the launch. It's not like the airline business. So you don't sell the rocket, you sell the launch.
Right.
And then later this year, we'll be launching our big rocket from Cape Canaveral. That's the Falcon 9. And that's the one that's going to be servicing the space station, among other things.
Is there a philosophy here that somehow the private sector can do a lot more than it has done in areas that seem, because of the size, reserved for government?
Yeah, definitely. The private sector is very good at optimization and innovation. I mean, the private sector is generally better at doing things than the government. I think that's fair to say. But there are certain things that the government that are suited to the government, like basic research and that sort of thing. So as far as SpaceX, the reason that there hasn't been a huge number of a big improvement in the space industry, because it is such a significant amount of capital that's needed to start a rocket company, and it's a very difficult technical challenge. And the number of people that really understand rocketry in the world is a very small number. So it's really a huge barriers to entry. And that's why we haven't seen the forcing function of improvement that there should have been over the years.
And your understanding came from this was not what you studied in college.
Well, I studied physics. But
studying physics and studying rocket science
right.
is a very different thing.
Yeah, no, it gives you the basics. Gives you the basics, good framework, good analytical framework.
Yeah.
But no, I picked it up along the way.
Now bring me to the car. And I drove a car this afternoon.
So far, so good.
Which was terrific. It's the Roadster.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's particularly a car that appeals to people in Silicon Valley because of interest in technology and high performance and lots of other things, or what, whether there are a lot of rich people who are willing to spend that kind of money for something they think is on the cutting edge of causes they believe in, sustainable energy.
Right.
Tell me about where you are in this development of this electric car, which
Sure.
has, most of all, this extraordinary sort of power.
Yeah. 0 to 60 time at 3.9 seconds, and the road.
This is extraordinary when you think about the sports cars and anything else that's out on the road today.
Yeah. In fact, on the Top Gear test track, our standard Roadster beats a Porsche GT3.
Exactly.
Which
that's
is
my point.
not
That's
bad.
a reference.
and the Roadster Sport will do even better.
Yeah. But you've also said, in terms of where you want to go, that developing a high-performance sports car is not what this is about.
Absolutely.
This is about something else, and you want to develop a sedan.
Yeah, the whole purpose behind Tesla, the reason I put so much of my time and money into helping create the business is we want to serve as a catalyst for accelerating the electric car revolution. Because you have a consumption of a public good. It's one of the most. It's really a common problem in economics. You have the same thing in fishing, where because there's no cost to fishing stocks, people just overfish and you have disaster that ensues. Right. And here we're not paying for the cost of the CO2 concentration in the oceans and atmospheres. We're not paying for all the ancillary effects of the wars and all the other things at the gas pump. So the only way to bridge that is with innovation. Is to try to make electric cars better sooner than they would otherwise be. Well, what that means is that, but there's an advantage that because the consumption of that energy is much more efficient in an electric car, and this is I'll get to why is the Tesla Roadster twice as efficient as a Toyota Prius, which is obviously not a sports car.
Right.
And the reason is because an electric motor is fundamentally super efficient at turning energy into motion. So a good electric motor, such as the one that we have in the Tesla Roadster, is about 90% efficient at turning the electricity into motion, whereas a gasoline internal combustion engine is somewhere typically in the range of around 17 or 18%. Most of what it does is generate heat. So even though it's only 2.5 gallons of gasoline, that 2.5 gallons of energy content goes really far compared with if that was, I think it's taken a while for the industry to come around to this point, but I think it's largely at this point it's almost become conventional wisdom that the future is electric cars. Right. The only question is this interim period of this transitional period. But if you look at the pace of battery improvement, it's clear that's why I mean it's inevitable.
Right.
The future will be entirely electric.
It certainly does say that. Right now, the reason to create a sports car, a Roadster, as the first stage of this, is because it attracts attention, or what?
Oh, so good, great question. So, because people often misinterpret why we have created a sports car, because they will say, you know, the implication will be
sports cars for rich guys is not a way to solve the energy problem.
Right, exactly. And they would say, like, that I feel that there was somehow a shortage of sports cars for rich guys or something like that, and that was the problem.
That's right.
And not, you know, if any new technology is expensive when it starts out. And you can point to pretty much anything, because the first thing that engineers are trying to do is make it work, and then when you make it work, then you optimize and you optimize and you optimize. And if you look at the early days of computers or cell phones or almost anything, even the early days of gasoline cars, they used to be toys for rich people until they were made affordable and mass production.
Henry Ford came along.
Yeah, and then you combine that with
he invented the car.
Yeah, and then you combine that with the fact that we're just a little startup, you know, there's just no way that we could afford $1 billion to make a giant car plant that would make, you know, hundreds of thousands of cars a year, because that's the kind of volume you have to get to make cheap cars. And then it's also the first iteration of the technology. So we had both a volume problem and a new technology problem. And so that naturally you have to
reach scale.
You have to reach scale, and you have to work the bugs out of the system, and so you got to make it, and you want to make your mistakes at a small scale.
Okay, so how's that going? Reaching scale and being able to create a business plan that will enable you to reach a large audience, you know, and create and continue the development of the technology that will make it even more attractive.
It's going really well, actually. So we had a few bumpy years in the beginning, but at this point we're producing at a steady state of about an annualized production rate of about 1,000 roadster sports cars a year. We unveiled our sedan a few months ago, which is a much more functional car, and it's a $50,000 car. So it's about half the price of the Roadster.
And the production run, say, for the year 2010 for the Roadster will be?
About 1,000.
And for the sedan?
The sedan is only coming out in 2 years.
So in 2011 will be the first year.
Right.
And what's the projection for that?
We're expecting to do 20,000 units a year for the sedan. It's always difficult to predict these things exactly, but our target is we'll produce a total of about 100,000 of them and about 20,000 a year, and there are going to be many variations on that. We'll do an SUV and we'll do, you know, other things, and then we'll do our third generation platform beyond the sedan. The Model S sedan will be a sub $30,000 car. So we're trying to get to mass production as soon as we possibly can, but that's both from the cars that we make ourselves, as well as the cars we do in partnership with others, like the Daimler deal you may have read about.
Right.
And, yeah.
So how do you measure the odds of success?
Personally, I would say success for me, for Tesla, is that we've accelerated the advent of electric cars by at least 5 years. But is
that the goal, to accelerate the advent of electric cars, or to create a great electric car company?
I think the two are synonymous.
Okay.
I mean, you do one, you do the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why is it that it's happening by a guy who created a startup in 2003 rather than a whole range of sort of industrial automobile companies around the world, not just here? Fiat is a successful car company, and they own Chrysler.
Right. Well, disruptive technology, like where you really have a big technology discontinuity, it tends to come from new companies.
Right.
You could ask the same question of why did Google come from Larry and Sergey?
Right. Because some of the criticism that comes at you and the company now is that you went out to seek a lot of external financing and did not reach your goals.
Well, it's taking us longer to reach our goals, but we're definitely reaching our goals.
What was it? Raise $100 million, or raise 40, or what was it? What was the goal?
Well, I think some of the stumbles were silly mistakes we made ourselves. Some of them were market externalities, and we were getting ready to raise, or we're in the process of raising about $100 million round. That began in sort of the summer of last year, and then ran into Force 5 hurricane.
Right, exactly. An economic circumstance that took everything in sight.
Yeah, and so that forced us to scale back our plans a little bit. We had to do a layoff. and we had to raise the money internally from existing investors. I had to put up a lot of the money personally, because there was just no money, and so that was sort of a hair-raising time for the company. But at this point, we're actually in good shape. We expect to be profitable in the third quarter,
and that comes from the success of the Roadster.
Yeah, and the Roadster. And we also have a powertrain supply business to Daimler as well for an electric Smart that we're doing with them.
Make the smart car an electric car.
Yeah, the smart car was always intended to be an electric car, but they could never get the battery right. So a year and a half ago, we met with Daimler, and I was trying to convince them to work with us. We've really tried hard to work with a lot of different car companies, and
what happened?
Well, I guess they think, well, they sort of took the attitude of what does some little startup in Silicon Valley know that we don't know or couldn't do, and
what would you say to them?
Well, we'd say drive our car and look at our technology, and I don't know, it just never seemed to sort of sink in. But Daimler did actually. So I went through Stuttgart one day on the way to India actually, and met with Dr. Weber, the head of global R&D, and we had a conversation. I said, well, what does it take for us to work together? We'd love to do something. We'd love to do something with an affordable mass market car that we ourselves couldn't do right now because we don't have the capital and resources.
Most of it.
Yeah, and so I said, well, what about an electric Smart? And because the Smart was always intended to be an electric car, and what would it take for us to work together? And he said, well, if you could do a prototype, that would really go a long way. So we did. We worked really hard. The powertrain team, led by J.B. Straubel, did an awesome job. And 40 days later, when they came out to visit, we said, here's the car, take a drive. And they really liked what they saw.
And so what did they do then?
Then they said, okay, well, let's take it sort of another step further, and they gave us a little R&D contract, and eventually got to the point where we got a contract for to supply 1,000 cars for them, and then if we do well on that, we'll potentially go into tens of thousands of cars. But this is a car that everyone could afford, and could hopefully come quite soon.
Do you have a profile of the people who you think will want to buy these Roadsters?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of person who likes a performance car. Maybe they own a Porsche or a Lamborghini or something.
This car is actually faster than a Lamborghini 0 to 60.
Yeah, it's I think faster than almost
anything I know of. Yeah.
I mean, there's the really sort of $1 million supercars. Obviously, those will beat it. Like the Ferrari Enzo is going to be faster.
Right. Exactly.
But it's pretty much faster than any normal sports car. And it's really easy to drive. If you want a high performance car with a clean conscience, this is the only option. And the sedan is going to be for someone that wants a great sedan and also a clean conscience, and it's also going to be cheaper to operate than So.
Right. You are, as you well know, a controversial guy as well.
I try not to be controversial,
I know
but it seems controversy seems to find me.
It finds you. It finds you because you think big. You're a software guy who has been successful in the private sector.
Yeah.
And see no reason you can't do things that other people have not been able to do, no matter how large the corporate enterprise. Create the best electric car, or B, put privately astronauts in space, which you say you will do in 2 years?
Well, yeah. It sort of depends on when NASA asks us to do that. If NASA turns on asks us to do that this year, which we're hopeful that they will, the White House has convened a panel on the future of human spaceflight. That panel is going to make the recommendations in a few months. I hope that some of those recommendations will be favorable to SpaceX, because the alternative is if SpaceX doesn't do it, we will be entirely dependent on the Russians to carry our astronauts to the space station after 2010. And billions of dollars will be spent on essentially a sole source situation to the Russians, which I think is outrageous.
And you haven't taken advantage of the opportunity to go into space yourself, have you?
No, I've not.
Have you wanted to?
If it was purely a matter of personal interest, I would have done it already.
Right.
I mean, I do want it.
Is Sergey interested in that, or no?
Sergey is
expressed some interest in that.
Some interest, yes. Yeah, I would like to go at some point, but it's. I'm also in the point where it's difficult for me to take personal risks. I used to take a lot of personal risks
because of children.
I've got my kids and responsibilities with the companies as well, and so if I do things where they have personal risk at this point, I risk more than my own.
You're right. Much success to you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.